yields. Carroll County ranks 4th in the state for the value of its crops and 9th in the state overall for agricultural production. This is a notable achievement and well worth considering when thinking about the value of our farmland preservation effort. This ends our summary of the report, and be pleased to answer any questions or further discussion.
First is the commissioner representing the district with the least agricultural activity and the least in terms of easements. I want to say I thought you all did a phenomenal job in summarizing this information and the work that you did, and we certainly appreciate it. A couple of things that I want to make sure we're all on the same page on, because I think there was some confusion. There was a term in here that said to restart, and we now recognize we had some communications issues, maybe amongst us, but it was never really our intent to stop. So we have confirmed with staff and those involved that things are rolling forward, and we recognize that there was a possibility that with some of the outcomes of this information, we might look to make some adjustments, but the program is as underway as it has been. So I want to just make sure we're clear on that. I think the impact that ag preservation and some of the innovative ways that have been put together to do this have on the entire county cannot go understated, and it's very important. I just appreciate the work you did on this.
Yeah, let me chime in too, Mr. President. I had occasion to read this last night, and I would agree that you all put forth a phenomenal work product. I agree with every one of your recommendations, for the record. What it does, what your recommendations do, is they buttress, what I already knew, is that our IPA program, the Critical Farms program and such, as administered by Ralph, are very effective, and that's probably why our program here is the envy of the country. So I certainly am a firm believer, as I said in the paper when this issue came up, that if it ain't broke, you don't fix it. And tinkering with the program too much, I think would not be very effective. So I appreciate your recommendations. I really do, and all your hard work.
I want to weigh in on this also, and I know a lot of work went into this report, and I know you looked seriously at the term easements, and Mr. Hall, I assume you determined that there were no tax advantages of it, which made it a difficult product, and I have to respect your findings on that, and I do. I still have a concern that we may need to step outside the box. I think the IPA program is brilliantly conceived. I mean, it works well from a price standpoint, in terms of what we pay for fair market value, in terms of how we do have these P&I payments, but it's not technically a debt in the sense that we have the bond matures and pays off the principal. But I still have some concerns. And Ralph, one of the concerns I have is we've been doing IPAs for, 2 years now? And we've got approximately, using round numbers, $1 million a year in debt service for them, or liability service. If this program continues on its current trajectory, where will we be in 5 or 10 years? Will we be up to $10 million in annual P&I payments? Where will we be? Do we have any pro forma financial spreadsheet showing what this annual debt or liability service will be for the installment payments if we continue on this trajectory? Where will we be in 2020? Because it's going to keep going up. Have you done any pro forma projections?
We have, and I want you to know that there are two things here that hit this current Board of Commissioners right full in the face. And number one, and I mentioned this a couple of times, we threw all the cards on the table in the last 2 years as a directive from the previous group of commissioners, which I agreed with. So I'm not going to do a blame Bush here.
Well, that's good.
And the reason was that the state program had effectively shut down. We had a tremendous backlog of landowners who had patiently waited for an answer, whether they were in or out of the program. We developed this program and put a tremendous amount of money up to clear the table. That was an anomaly. it's something that I never expected to see again as far as the amount of activity that we had strictly devoted to IPAs. Moving forward, as I said in my beginning remarks, we're reevaluating and evaluating the program as we speak. Do I see that level of commitment going forward on a yearly basis? The answer is no, because I see a combination of things that the task force has recommended that will pull back on that, Commissioner. We have oversight from Mr. Zaleski's office, from Rob Burke, from you, from our Ag Advisory Board, from the citizens at large. So I don't perceive that this program is going to get to the point where we see that it's out of control. There are too many checks and balances.
You said we did have projections as to what the
So the projections that
interest service payments.
if you took the $1 million commitment that we have for the next 19 years now, so 1 year's off the table, I see a point where the commissioners, whether it's you or a future group of commissioners, is going to say we have met our goals. In the meantime, I think this program is flexible enough to adjust to the conditions that are at hand. So I'm giving you a very bureaucratic answer.
Well, you are,
but it's as honest as I can be at this point.
Every $1 million of IPA payments is equivalent to approximately $10 million it would be the equivalent of making payments on $10 million of general obligation bonds. And my concern is that we continue this trajectory for, let's say, 10 more years. These payments go up to $10 million a year. That's like another $100 million in debt for the county. That's what my concern is. I don't know where we reach the point where we cut it off, but
I do.
I think, Ted, do you want to weigh in on this?
Yes, I do. I perceive this program to ebb and flow as the funding is available for it. It's always been that way, Commissioner. If you look back at how much commitment that the local commissioners have always given to this program, it's always based on how much we can afford. And that's the best answer I can give you right now. You will be the determining factor in this.
Or some future board.
Yeah, that's right.
Or some future board.
Or for some future board.
Yep. Mr. Zaleski, I think, would like to weigh in as well. Thank you, Ralph.
If we assume that the IPA program continued on as the biggest part of everything we're doing, that's an assumption that can be changed, but if we just assume that it does continue, we have looked a couple decades out, and having to build in assumptions, of course, to say, okay, what does this look like? How will it play? We have that available. I didn't bring it with me today, but it was shared with the task force, and you can have it as well.
We have a copy up here if you want to refer to it.
That's okay. I'd rather not try and get into the numbers now.
Bill, I'd like to see it if you don't mind.
Well,
Go ahead.
The big idea you need to understand in how we're approaching this is another assumption. We've assumed that the commitment to AgPres in total that we have today continues on into the future. Another assumption that can change, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Every time we take on a new IPA, we've taken on a string of payments for 20 years, but we make a comparable reduction in what Ralph has available for additional activity in the future. So this is balancing itself over all those years.
Right.
And in theory, depending on exactly what happens, you could reach a point where now that flow of money is fully committed to IPAs, and Ralph can't do anything other than the little bit that's left in connection with the state program until some of it's paid off and you start to free up money again. Now, I want to go back to that assumption that the flow of money that's assumed over those years. That could change. You or another Board of Commissioners could say, no, we're not putting that much money in anymore. If that happens, then the IPA program would have to stop sooner than we've already anticipated. And I just want to point out, in any year, you look at what we've already done, and you say, you know what, we're starting to get uncomfortable with this. Even though there's a plan, we're uncomfortable with this. You can say to Ralph at any point, okay, we're not doing IPAs anymore. We have the commitment that's already in place, but we don't have to continue taking on additional IPAs.
And what you're saying is there's no maintenance of effort requirement with regard to ag preservation, right? We can stop this anytime we want it.
Right, you can stop additional activity.
Right.
You would still have the commitment that's already in place
That's
until
correct.
that's done.
But also, Ted, isn't the thing that really doesn't show up in any of these numbers, and the purpose for doing this as a whole, the fact that there are offsetting expenses that if these lots were developed, we would have as a community that some future Board of Commissioners will not be paying.
Right,
I mean, if these areas developed, really what we're doing is taking a very discounted approach to today. Yes, we're making commitments so that some future board has $10 million, presumably at some point, of payments. But that year, they're also not paying on the equivalent of some schools and some roads and some fire companies and whatever else may go into the fact that if the development rights were there and they were in fact developed, there would be offsetting costs to the community.
Right.
That's certainly something for you to consider, but we have not made any attempt to bring this into the plan.
I understand, but that's sort
Only on
of the flip
extended
side of this, which is hard to quantify and doesn't really show up. But I mean, with those on the task force, I mean, that's sort of an integral component into the.
I think, and I don't have the numbers, I think you have them here, your tax dollar for the person that has a lot or a house, I think you're spending about $1.40 for every dollar that you take in. Whereas you're doing the agriculture side of it, it's 40-something cents. So what you're saying here is in the future, if the land was preserved, the cost of operating the county, so to speak, by not having the additional development is going to be in a long run more beneficial. And in theory, and we're looking down the road 18 years, in theory these things are, that 20-year commitment is going to go away and there's going to be additional funds for the next one if the future boards and the need is to have additional monies set aside.
Right.
Because these payments will terminate at the end of the 20-year period.
And at some point, if we did slow, and I'm not suggesting that we would, but if we, just financial realities meant we slowed down, just mathematically speaking, when the payments, that's 18, 19, 20th year of the payments in years when we were more aggressive drop off, and we're not adding a comparable amount to it, what we're going to see over some time is this will peak and then sort of start to reduce that obligation on those boards in those out years.
That's 20 years out, though.
Well, I understand, but the whole program will look like a very long
Look,
term.
look,